So I wanted to share my story of cholinergic urticaria and the impact that it had on my life in hopes that maybe it'll help somebody that may be trying to figure out what's going on with them or with symptoms they may be having, or if they recently got this diagnosis and things that I learned over 2 years that helped me to deal with it. So some backstory. A couple years ago, I started getting some itchiness on the tops of my feet when I would work out, and it felt initially like what I assumed would be athlete's foot. And so I tried some topical stuff, and surprisingly, made it worse. So over the next few weeks, the symptoms went from just my feet, the tops of my feet. I started noticing that it was affecting, further up my legs. So the only times I would feel it though were when I was working out. So when I would get sweaty, my feet would get this itching, kind of itching, burning, um, and then it would go away within a couple of minutes. And so as time passed, I noticed that the itching and burning would start to affect like my scalp and my face, like where my hair was, and then eventually, very quickly, within a couple of weeks, it was my entire body. So the symptoms that I felt, and it would feel like every pore in my arms, my face, anywhere that had a hair that was in it, it would feel like there was a needle being shoved into that pore. And it felt like this intense, sharp, itching, burning. That was, it was crippling. It was the most intense discomfort I think I'd ever felt. As it got, worse and worse and worse, and time progressed, I realized that like I couldn't do anything. Anything that would involve temperature change was excruciating, and I couldn't figure out at the time that it was a temperature thing. It just I learned along the way that that's what the trigger was. So I started going to different specialists. So as a healthcare provider, I started calling specialists and trying to get answers. And I started taking a really detailed journal of like daily symptoms. I saw a neurologist, I saw a dermatologist, endocrinologist, rheumatologist. I had blood work done, genetic testing done, MRIs done to try to rule out things like MS or some other neurological condition, some sort of genetic issue, blood issues. And I just kept hitting dead ends, just dead end after dead end after dead end. And it was really, really frustrating. Um, I called a vascular specialist, peripheral vascular specialist, and we had a really great combo. And I said, I told him out of respect for his office time in his clinic, I just wanted to see, is this sound like something that falls into their wheelhouse? And he mentioned that he also was having the same symptoms. He had moved to Texas from the Northeast, I believe it was Pennsylvania, and he mentioned that he was also having some of these symptoms, and that he guaranteed me it wasn't a peripheral vascular issue. So that was helpful in that I knew it wasn't, that, but still didn't have an answer. So as time went on, I had symptoms from October of that year to April of the next year. And in that length of time, that stretch of time, the symptoms were so bad, I couldn't exercise or coach because the temperature change would cause me to have these symptoms. Even in my clinic, if I had, a patient came in with an extra, with a person with them, like a kid and a parent, that extra body being in the room would bring the room temperature up enough to where it would cause a reaction. I couldn't demo rehab for people. I couldn't coach. I couldn't exercise. And it was just, it completely took away all the things that gave me joy. And so when April came that next year, just as fast as the symptoms seemed to came on, they were gone. So everything was gone. And I was very leery of things for a few weeks, but after a few weeks of not having symptoms, I just assumed whatever it was is over. And I was, thankful that I didn't have this issue anymore until the following October. And it came back exactly the same way that it had before. And so I had kept my journal of, every doctor I went to, every symptom I had, triggers, what things they were trying, what testing they did, what medications we tried, everything, day by day journal. And so this when this symptom came back, I knew that I had gone through everything internally, and so what was left was external. So I looked at all of the environmental data that I could over the previous year, and I linked, I laid looked at UV index, temperatures, precipitation, humidity, pollen count, air quality, anything I could find, and I laid it out, and I looked at my journal, and I started plotting when I would have bad days and good days. And what I found was humidity was a factor. And so I went back through all, the PubMed data and stuff that I had searched, and I added one more term, humidity. And it popped up just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of articles of cholinergic urticaria. And I got on Reddit, and I found threads of people that, as I'm reading their stories, it's the same exact story as mine. Exposure to sunlight triggers, a symptom. Going from, outside if it's cool to inside into a heated room, trigger. If the room temperature change, trigger. Anything that I could find that I had symptom-wise was these people were having the same thing. So some of the things I had learned along the way were actually treatment methods management methods that people were using. One thing I found was if I could deal with the pain long enough to actually sweat, that I wouldn't have a problem. If I took a hot shower, I got in a hot bath, that temperature change didn't cause a problem, but it was when it was dry. And so I bought a sauna. So this is how I managed it for the next year, or the next 6 months from that October to that April. This is how I managed it. So I bought a sauna for my house, a little steam sauna. Every morning I would get up, I would get into the sauna, and I would sit there and force myself to sweat. And it was absolutely miserable. It was some of the worst pain I've ever felt in my life. But if I could make it through that 10 minutes, then it would make things feel better. And I'd buy myself a window essentially of the day where I'd have like 90% symptom reduction. And I also read through the threads and found people that use different topicals, different lotions to keep their skin moist. So I found this super fat, high fat content lotion. So I would get in the sauna, I'd essentially torture sweat for 10 minutes. And then once the pain stopped, I knew I was okay. I'd get out, I'd, clean off a little bit, cool, either a cold shower, or I would use, like a sink bath, with a washcloth. And then I would cover myself in this high fat lotion. And that would get me through the day, most of the day. About lunchtime, I'd reapply the lotion. But by doing so, I was able to keep my skin essentially like wet, and I could work out, I could coach, I could do all the things that I couldn't do. Were kind of given back to me. I'd still have some flare-ups from time to time, but they were nowhere near as intense. And so the diagnosis that I essentially was given was pleural occlusion, cholinergic urticaria. And so what happened was, when your pores are trying to regulate body temperature, they dilate to allow heat and moisture to come out. With pleural occlusion, cholinergic urticaria, I say that 5 times fast, your pores don't open, so there's nowhere for that heat and that sweat to get out, so it ends up dispersing through your skin, and it creates this stinging, burning, itching pain that when you force enough like kind of sweat to try to push through that pore, it eventually kind of makes its way through, and that's where you get the relief. And then once the pore was open, I'd stay super moisturized so that the pore would kind of have a little bit of moisture on it to allow moisture to continue to come out as needed. And that was honestly how I made it through the next 6 months of symptoms. So I bought online on Amazon just a portable home sauna, wet sauna. And I would take it with me. If I traveled somewhere, I'd take it with me. Every room that I was in had a humidifier. So my living room at home, my bedroom, and my office all had humidifiers that were constantly running anywhere that I was for more than 10 minutes or so. And so for the next 6 months, that's how I managed my symptoms. And come April, the following, that second year, I tested the waters to see, because the previous year was when April was when the symptoms stopped. So that April I tested, and the symptoms didn't come back. And so Last October would have been year 3, where symptoms would have started. I didn't do any of my things. I wanted to wait to see if the symptoms would start, and that was the first year that I didn't have the symptoms. So I made it all through last year, fall and winter without symptoms, and then now we're at the end of October, and so far I haven't had symptoms this year. So it's been 2 years without any symptoms, and I'm super, super thankful. This this condition almost ruined my life. I'm being completely honest. The worst flare up I ever had was we had taken a trip with some friends to Colorado, and I had a flare up there. We had gotten in the hot tub again. Wet heat was never a problem. It was dry. So once we got out of the hot tub, I dried off. My skin kind of dried back out, and I started having a flare up. It was my whole back, and like my back was the worst. It felt like I was just getting stabbed with like hypodermic needles all from my scalp down my back, all the back of my legs. And so I was laying on the floor, convulsing from the pain, just trembling because of how bad it hurt. And as I was clenching and convulsing, it was raising my body temperature and making it worse. So I was in this almost like unbreakable cycle of trying to calm down and relax and not being able to because it hurt so bad. And so I'm laying on the floor, and my friends and girlfriend are grabbing wet towels to try to lay on my back to cool me off. But every time it would, we pull the towel off, it would just start over again. And I laid there for 10 minutes. It was the most agonizing 10 minutes of my entire life. Just wondering if it would ever end. And after about 10 minutes, I was able to kind of breathe and calm down enough to where, I kind of rode that flare up out. And I was so exhausted from fighting. It was almost like having a seizure. And so the second that it stopped, I just passed out. And in that moment, I had some really dark thoughts, to be completely honest. I If I were any weaker of mind or spirit, I probably would have ended it for myself. It was that life altering. I couldn't work. I couldn't all the things I love, fitness and coaching and health and exercise. I couldn't do. I grew up in Florida on a beach. I love hot weather, and I was terrified of hot weather now. And because I didn't know at the time what was going on, and had kind of relegated myself to believing that I was going to have to move to Alaska or Canada or somewhere that never really gets hot, and just that was going to be my life. And it was a very, very dark time and very hard realization. And so after 2 years now, or a full year without symptoms, and now going into a second year, my hope is that it's completely over and that I've got it under control. And if not, that I thank the Lord, thankful that I have a plan that helps to keep symptoms so low that I can still kind of function and live a normal life. The hardest thing to talk about, honestly, with this was that all of my symptoms came after a COVID vaccination. I am not an anti-vaxxer. I am not anti-medicine. I'm not these things. I'm very pro-research and, kind of do your own research. I don't give people advice about vaccinations because it's not my specialty, and I want people to make their own decision. But during that time, during the pandemic, that was, as a healthcare provider, we made the best call for ourselves and for our patients, and my first symptoms happened 30 days after I got a COVID shot. And so I track my workouts. I track my food. I mean, I can tell you what I ate and what I did pretty much any day from now to 10 years ago. And the only thing different in my entire life and my entire routine was that I got a COVID vaccine 30 days before my first symptom. And when I saw a dermatopathologist, was one of the specialists I saw, and shared with her my journal and my symptoms and everything I'd tried. I told her, I said, this is going to sound wacky quacky, and I'm not trying to, but the only thing that's different is that I had a COVID vaccine. It's the only thing that was different in my routine from anything years and years before. This was the only new thing. And I said, and I know I can't make this, definitive claim that this thing caused my problems, but it's just hard to think outside of that. And I don't want to feel crazy. And she told me, she looked me dead in the eyes and she said, "You're not crazy. In the last 2 years," or at that point, she said, "In the last 2 years, I have had more unexplainable things come into my clinic than I have my entire practice since I've been a doctor." And it gave me some peace that I wasn't crazy and that, a specialist wasn't thinking that I was some wacky, quacky doctor. But it definitely gave me some peace that I was maybe on the right track. So it's a awful, awful condition. It is I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy, and it almost took everything away from me. And you know, all I can, what I want to share with people is, what symptoms I had. If you have something like that, or you're trying to get an answer, if you just got this diagnosis and you don't know what to do, maybe some of these management strategies can help you. The sweat therapy, the lotion, things of that nature can help you to live a somewhat normal life until you either figure out what your long-term plan is, or hopefully the symptoms go away for good. But that's my story of pleural occlusion, cholinergic urticaria. And I can't express how much information I got from Reddit. It was one of the biggest resources that once I found a name for this thing, I found so many threads on Reddit that gave me so much helpful information. It gave me a lot of hope because I was reading people's stories and feeling like I wasn't alone. So that was extremely helpful. And if you are dealing with this, I truly wish you the best, and just can't express enough to just take notes, try things, experiment, read threads, connect with people, to try to find a way to live a normal life and to potentially get past it. So hope this is helpful for those that may be dealing with something like this. And I wish you the best of luck.